Doc was hearing you, Brother Black. You hearing me, sis?
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. That's why I keep asking. It's okay. I'm hearing you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lamley, and thank you, Brother Black. I want to say welcome to that person who you invited on. I'm going to give you the opportunity to really introduce her.
Sister Black.
Sister Black.
Sister Black.
Oh,
yes.
Man, that's amazing. So, welcome, Sister Black. We're happy to have you on. As was said this evening, we're going to be looking at the whole subject of depression. There are a number of persons who are going to be presenting this evening, and I'm going to invite those persons to really prepare themselves to share with us. But before we go, there are a few things I really want to share. We are living in a reality that has happiness, it has sadness, a reality that brings many seasons of emotions as we speak. You know, it would not be considered to be sane to always go around, be happy-go-lucky. Sometimes we get down. So the question that we really want to answer, how should we respond to all of these things that happens around us as Christians? And should we be depressed? Should we suffer depression, or should we suffer from depression? I believe that as we move forward, we will get somewhat a definition of what depression is, and I think that will set the stage as to how we view everything that's forward. So I'm going to open the floor. Dr. Lamley made mention of to start their presentation and to really share with us what they have found from the Spirit of Prophecy and the Bible where depression is concerned. So let me ask, who's going to be the first?
I wouldn't mind
All right,
starting.
I want.
But brother, you have put this up here and I can't get back to mine because I have prepared something and I can't get back to my screen that I have prepared. Because you have put your PowerPoint on.
So this was mine. I'm going to ask if it can be taken down. And
I can get back to mine.
Permission be given to those persons who are going to be presenting. So Sister Chambers, will you be the first?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind being the first because what I've done, I mean, I know Doc said that we should just use the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy.
Right.
But I realize that we need to get a definition of depression.
That's correct.
And to see the difference between depression and sadness, because some people were saying that Jesus was depressed and Sister White was depressed. And in my studies, I didn't see it, so I want to bring that out tonight. And then we can have a discussion based on that.
Let me break, Sister Chambers. Yes, for the definition, we won't really find it in the Bible or Spirit of Prophecy.
Right. So I use Psychiatry Association to do my background.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to define what depression. Now, first I looked at the difference between grief and sadness and depression, because some people think if you are sad or you're grieving, you're depressed, but that is not so.
Sister Chambers, one second. I've made you co-host, so if you have a PowerPoint, you can put it up.
I can put it up?
Yes, man. I've made you co-host so that you're able to share your screen.
All right. So I should share screen and then what? Share screen and then
open your PowerPoint and then click on share screen.
You can see it now?
It's coming up. Yes, we are seeing it.
Wow, good.
You can press F5 if you want it to bring it to the first, to click on the first slide.
I saved those already. Should I Christian be depressed? I just had the heading on all that. So now this is, everybody can see what I'm saying now?
Yes.
Very good. All right, so grief, sadness versus depression. So as you see, grief, and there are some similarities, but there are also some differences. Loss of interest in things one's love, and loss of is both by persons who are depressed and persons who are grieving or who are sad. When if you're grieving or you're sad, your self-esteem is monitored. So your self-esteem is most time intact. But when you're depressed, you lose your self-esteem. Grief or sadness is usually short-lived, but depression lingers for a long time, over 2 weeks, going into months, and sometimes will even go into years if you're not helped. So we need to know the difference. Um, the causes are similar. Also, you have loss of income or loss of loved ones, and a traumatic event. These can lead to either grief or depression. So if you lose a loved one or you lose your income, I don't know what is going to happen next, and you are sad. If it prolongs and you see no way out, you're looking around, because if you look up you'll see light, but if you're looking around and looking down, it's going to look dark and gloomy. So if that happens, it will lead to depression. Please stop me and tell me the contents, doctor.
I would want for the other persons who are asked to prepare, if there is anything that they would want to share in terms of depression and the definition of depression.
Right. So I can be stopped anywhere along the line.
Right. So I wanted someone to really, if it is that you have something to add where depression is concerned, I'm going to invite you now to really add it at this point.
All right. My definition from the spirit of prophecy is for depression is it is an episode of sadness, more or less the same, or apathy, along with other symptoms that last for at least 2 weeks, 2 consecutive weeks or more. And is 2 consecutive weeks and is severe enough to interrupt daily activities.
You know what is interesting, Brother Black?
Yes, sir.
Depression is for 2 consecutive quarters.
Yes.
So the depression is not a moment of sadness. It's a prolonged.
Right.
Right.
It's just like when we talk about the depression in nature itself. Well, for example, when it says there's a depression, normally the sky begins to cry. It's not true.
Right.
For a while, it's not the typical rain will just fall for a day. It's a prolonged period, and it's referred to as a depression. Is there anyone else who really want to add to that? Anything else to add? All right.
No.
Yes, go ahead. All right, you can continue, Sister Chambers.
Thank you. All right. So this is just putting it together what I said before, what Brother Black said. It's very interesting that the spirit of prophecy is saying the same thing that the psychiatrists are saying. All right. There are different types of depression.
Yes.
And different so you have the biochemistry, you have a difference or imbalance in certain chemical in the brain, and may contribute to symptoms of depression. Thyroid imbalance can also cause depression, as Dr. Lammy said the other night. Genetics, depression can run in families. So if you have a twin, if one is depressed, the other one might get depressed also. Personality, some people with low self-esteem, they are easily overwhelmed by stress and are generally pessimistic. And they appear to be to experience more depression. Now, as Christians, we are not supposed to be pessimistic and have low self-esteem. So these things should not be a part of us. Then we have the environmental factors, continuous exposure to violence, like people who live in places where you have continuous gunfire and they have to be hiding on their bed on a regular basis. Neglect or abuse or poverty may make some people more vulnerable to depression. And then last, you have seasonal depression. Some persons who live in where you have long winters and they can't see any sunshine, they tend to get depressed because it's just gloomy. And if you notice, even in Jamaica, if we have a tropical depression, as you say, brother, and the time is there's no sunshine for a few days, we start feeling sad. But it's just that is just sad and gloomy. But people who live for months without sunshine, they can get depressed. All right? I don't know if anybody else want to comment on this.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Then what are we finding out here that is very consistent in everything we've looked at? As we look at our salvation itself and the provisions that were made, what is consistent between the depression here and our salvation?
What, repeat please, what's the difference? I'm not hearing the last part.
All the things that we have looked at so far, what is consistent with this and our salvation, the whole plan of salvation? What is consistent?
What is consistent and the whole plan of salvation? Maybe, well, I think Satan doesn't want us to make it to the kingdom. But it also depends, I think, also on our decision. We're not forced. We call it now human beings. We are social beings that are entitled to our own decisions.
Well, yes. But as we look at the whole...
Sorry?
Yes, as we look at the depression, what we see is darkness, we see sadness, we see gloominess.
Right.
And all of those things start to come out, you know, right. Melancholy, misery, unhappiness, woe,
pessimism,
downheartedness, despondency, dispiritedness, low spirit, heavy-heartedness, and hopelessness. All of these things seem to be piled up into all of what we have been looking at so far.
Yeah.
In terms of our salvation, how does the state of mind compare? I see Leighton's hand up.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, Leighton.
Is depression, is it a sickness? Is it considered a sickness?
All right. Is depression sickness? Let us
yes. Yes, there are some depression that, as I said, if you have thyroid imbalance, it can cause depression. Or if you have chemical imbalance in your brain, so it can be caused from sickness also, my brother.
So it would be considered a sin then, because I read in, I think his early writings or counsels on health, that to be sick is a sin because sick is a result of a violation of God's law.
All right, Stephen.
So would depression be a sin?
All right, I see Stephanie's hand up. All right, Stephanie, you can go ahead and share.
Okay, happy Sabbath, everyone. I don't like the comment or the suggestion that only some form of depression is a sickness and not all forms.
Go ahead.
All forms of sickness.
As far as I'm concerned, once you're depressed, it's a sickness. And I would like to know what is the distinction then if only some forms of depression is a sickness and not some.
No, I did not say this some form of sickness. I think he was talking about physically. Once you're depressed, you're sick, and that is it. But some depressions are caused from physical.
That's what I got from you, Sister Chambers.
Okay.
But once you're depressed, you're sick.
Okay, there are two questions. Well, one has been responded to and answered. The other one that Leighton just asked, is depression sinful? That is a question.
I believe so.
Call it sinful.
That's what, a sign or what do you call it? An attribute of sin. And it's a plan of the enemy. It's one of the enemy. I react to is that it's like a stronghold. It's yeah.
Excuse me, brother, you're a little low. I can hardly hear you. Please see if you can turn up the thing a little more for me. Thank you.
Okay. Depression is like a stronghold from the enemy, and as well as your decision that you make, things that you might enter through channels that you might allow for whatever negative influences, physically, mentally, social, emotionally to enter. Because remember, Satan wants to destroy, so you try everything. But the grace of God, eh?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I say something, brother? Some types of depression, as I said earlier, as on the screen,
Sister Chambers is speaking now. Go ahead.
have no control over it, my brother. Some of them, like if you have thyroid imbalance, or if you have chemical imbalance in your brain, you have no control over it. But there are some that you will have control over. I don't know if everybody agree with me. And for persons who have the seasonal.
Okay, I would want to say something on that when you finish.
Yes, brother, but go ahead.
Yes. Depression here, in my opinion, and from the spirit of prophecy, would be a disease. It affects us all, or it affects us. It is considered a transgression of God's law. For every transgression, there's a penalty, whether it comes now or it comes later on. So, in my opinion, then, we have, we have the Bible, sickness and disease comes as a result of something. One of three causes. For the glory of God, for the violation of natural laws, or for the violation of spiritual laws. And it ties in with disease, I would think. Of course, we know the natural laws, we know our commandments, and God does things, as in the case of Job then, where he does it to uplift God's name.
Yes. All right, thank you so much, Brother Black.
Yes.
His hand was up earlier. She's still interested to add to the conversation. Sister Stephanie?
I agree with Brother Black. As with every other illness, it would be a sin, because if we are in violation, if it's a case where it's either that we're in violation of God's laws, of whether it's of nature or the laws of health, or if it is a violation of spiritual laws.
All right. Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, Sister Chambers.
If we look at the environmental factors, I wouldn't call that, because it says continuous exposure to violence. If I live in an area where there's continuous gunfire and I can't leave, or if I was abused as a child and I didn't get any help, any counseling, or if I was neglected by my parents don't love me, or I'm in poverty, and I don't see any way out, would you call that a sin? I want to find that out. But these are one of the causes of depression.
All right. Leighton, I see your hand up, and I know you asked a similar question. So I'm going to ask you if you could respond to Sister Chambers' question just a while ago. You're living in a area where you have a lot of violence. Everything seems to be all gloomy, and you are existing in that kind of environment, and you become depressed. Would you consider that to be a sin? Go ahead, lady.
Yes, it's a sin, because even our parents, the sin of our parents, we can be affected by it. Because, for instance, if a parent smoke, the consequence of that sin, a child will suffer from that. If you're in that environment that she described, the innocent, or this quote unquote innocent, because we are all to sin now and the consequence of sin. So in short, yes. Answer to that question is yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we look.
Brother Duke?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'll just add to it to say disease never comes without a cause.
True.
Yes, I agree, but sometimes the cause is not yours personally. I will admit that all this cause from sin, because if you are neglected by your parents or you're abused, that is cause from sin. But sometimes you personally have no control over what is happening.
Yes.
Anybody agree with me?
Yes, I agree with you.
I agree,
Minister
yeah.
of Healing, Sister White speaks of that.
Right. All right. Anybody else? What's your Novia? I see Novia's hand.
Okay, good evening, everybody. All right. So I've been listening to the types of depression or the triggers for depression, and I too did some little background about what really is depression, and unearthed a lot of what Sister Chambers had to say.
Right.
With the question that is currently on the table, I might not have the exact where it is from exactly in the spirit of prophecy, but what I've read is there are two words that I want to make use of tonight: succumb and characterize. And let me use them in the two separate contexts. A child of God must make, so depression and feelings of despondency and the feelings of anxiety and grief, distrust, whatever you want to put it, however you want to term depression, discontent, and the triggers, so to speak. A child of God must make a deliberate and purposeful decision not to succumb.
Right.
So these feelings might come on to you.
Yes.
But the child of God must make a deliberate and purposeful decision not to succumb to such troubled state of mind. The question is then asked, how can this, through all that, me just lose my mother, how can I not be depressed? Through a firm reliance on God's love.
That's right.
Height of the apparent absence. So we might feel at that point in time that God is not, where is God in all of this? So that's an apparent absence. He's always there. But because of what you're going through, you fail to see. But as a child of God, we must not succumb. The second word I'm using again based on the readings I've done is characterize. So Sister White, she recognized that faithful believers, and let me say maybe Christians then, are not exempt from feelings of depression and despair, feelings of depression and despair. However, she did not believe at any point, I know I've gone through, she did not believe that these feelings should characterize their lives.
Right.
So that's how I would look at it. So can a child of God feel depressed? I would agree. I would say yes, they can. But are they going to are they going to succumb? That was the first word. Or are we going to let these feelings characterize us? Oh no, because we know our true source. We know that we should place our firm reliance on God's love.
Amen. Thank you so much. As a Sister Doreen, just a moment before you speak, Sister Doreen. We're looking at types of depression, and right here we see where Sister Henry opens up another mode of thinking. That can persons become sad? Can Christians become depressed? Yes. And I've read in Sister White's writings too that Jesus Christ himself became depressed, and when the angels came, it relieved him of the depression. So you have different types of depression. There's something that I'm going to share later down as we go through with one of the prophets, and I would really want us to discuss that as well. But the different types of depression we have here: the biochemistry, the genetics, the personality, environmental factors, seasonal depression. Are there any other kind of types of depression that you really want to put in? Probably this is not what Sister Mitchell had her hand up for, so I'm going to take her now. I just want us to think about that as we move further. Sister Mitchell, go ahead, and then either Tanika or Christopher. Go ahead, sis. Sister Mitchell? Would love to hear what you wanted to say, sis.
Hello? Yes?
All right.
Can I say something?
All right.
When I take
Let me take.
person come back.
Tanika, go ahead. Sister
Hello, good night.
speaking.
Sister Mitchell is...
Oh, go ahead, Sister Mitchell.
Sister Mitchell is speaking.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sis. Sister Mitchell, go ahead.
I think there's always some problem with our internet.
Oh. All right.
Yeah.
Let me take Tanika.
Can I say something?
Let's do it in order. This is sinners hands up. So
Take.
they have not spoken. Let them do now.
I'll hear from you, Stephen.
Happy Sabbath, everybody.
Christopher. All right.
Sabbath.
All right. I want to look. I agree with everything that was said. Well, let me say I agree with the medical definition of depression for the 20th and the 21st century. But I also agree with what the sister just said just now. We're looking at, can a Christian or should a Christian suffer depression? And we're looking at it from a biblical perspective.
Right.
In the Bible, we don't see the word depression, but there are synonyms in the Bible that speaks to this state of mind. Synonyms like anguish, distress, sorrowful or exceeding sorrowful. These are some of the things that are expressed in the scriptures that speaks to a state of depression, which when we look at the context of some of these, like for instance, let's use Jesus. Let's use Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says that my soul is exceeding sorrowful.
Right.
Which means that he was pressed down. Now, when Miss White spoke in Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 3, page 94, where she says that there were frequent times when his disciples would see Christ depressed. We have to look at the word and what the word meant in her day. The word depression did not mean disease and sin and all of this that we are saying. What she was saying was Christ was pressed down. He was burdened. He was in anguish of soul.
Yes.
You know, and so we can't look at the word depression from a 20th century and a 21st century mindset and apply it to the scriptures. You know, we have to use what the scripture shows. And in the scriptures, when we find a Job or when we find an Elijah or when we see a Moses who went through anguish of soul, it does not say that it's because of sin or some sickness, but there were burdens on their heart that they were pressed down for, and they were pouring out their souls to God. So there arose a level of depression. So that's how I look at depression from the biblical standpoint. While I agree with the medical definition of depression, I don't agree that from the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy, when it speaks of depression in certain contexts, that it is sin. Now, earlier somebody said something that is very pointed, and I think we should really revisit that. The person, I think it was the same sister who said that it shouldn't characterize our life.
Sister Henry, yes.
Right, so depression now becomes sin when we take our eyes off of Jesus and become self-pitiful. So we lose sight of the promises of God. So even while we are pressed down and while we are beaten and all of these things, Paul says we are not forgotten. And so we can stand on the promises of God, though we are being pressed down. You know, so depression from a biblical point of view and in the context that we can look at it from, it don't necessarily mean that it is sin or it constitutes sin. It becomes sin when we become doubtful, when we become self-centered, when we become pitiful of ourselves and the things that we are going through. let me just say this, and then I'll mute. In John 16 verse 33, in verse 32, Jesus told his disciples that the time is coming when they're going to be scattered, right? So he told them of a conflict that was coming, which was going to try them. And then he said, I have told you these things that in me you might have peace. Why? Because Christ knew that something is going to come that is going to press them down. They're going to become depressed. So he's reassuring them that in me you can find peace. Don't lose sight of me, even when going through that. Then he continued and he says, in this world, you will have tribulation, which is another synonym for depression. You will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So I don't fully agree with the whole labeling of depression as sin and as a disease and as a sickness and all of that. It is an emotion that everybody experiences.
So my brother, you shouldn't call it depression then. I would say you shouldn't say depression. If you have to say, because those persons, Elisha and Christ in the garden, if you have to say, yes, he was depressed, to what extent was he depressed? It was a concern. It lays on his, because he was carrying, in Christ's case, he was carrying the weight of the world. The sin of the weight of the world was on his shoulder. Therein, yes, he was concerned, I would say, but he was not depressed. He asked his father if it was possible, but then he said his father will have to be done. Right. He was not fearful.
Right.
So hence, I would want to say, let's look at it. I don't know if there's another term.
Right. Can I say something now, please?
Give me one second, my sister. I hear you, Brother Black, but I didn't say that he was depressed. The spirit of prophecy said that he was depressed. And I gave the definition for depression in her time. It says the act of being pressed down, being in a low state. So we can call it depression.
Before you get
Berry?
Sister Chambers,
yes.
Give me a moment before you get in. With all that is being said, bear in mind something that the question came out of what we were studying, because we're looking at depression and the clinical definition of what is depression.
Right.
Right. So remember, some of the terms that we use for depression is lack of interest, loss of will, lack of pleasure, low self-esteem, persistent sadness over, and remember I gave you that it has to be over two weeks or more persistently. I've outlined about 8 different conditions.
Right.
10.
That would constitute depression.
Right.
Right. So in looking at these, I'm asking, should Christians exhibit those? No, all that I've been seeing when we're doing it, I saw where we talk about the children, or we were specifically, we were looking at Christians.
Right.
Persons who don't know Christ, they are going to respond to things different. Well, they should respond, or they would respond to things different from the person who are Christians.
Right.
So the part I want us to look at, and you guys have been bringing out some good part. Brother Chris had brought out the biblical depression of the biblical description of depression. Sister the other part of the feelings, right, and what characterizes and succumbing to that. No, is it the succumbing that when we succumb to that, it's going to lead us off into the word definition. You understand? So therefore, if we continually look at the word's definition, should any Christian, and I'm going to try and find them back and just list them again for you, all right? And and we will ask, we will go along the line, should Christians, based on the word of God, be experiencing these kind of things that the world has out there?
All right.
I have them right before my eyes here, Doc.
All right.
Guideline.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Dr. Lamley, I said most of what I was going to say, because we have I still don't agree that Jesus was depressed based on the definition of depressed, because you have to be consistently down for 2 weeks or more.
Or more, that's right.
That was just a day in the Garden of Gethsemane. So he was sorrowful, as it says. But I have that also in my presentation. He was sorrowful. He was exceedingly sorrowful. But it did not last for a very long time.
Right.
So that is why I would not say that he was depressed. He was sorrowful.
All right. So we're going to ask if you have Brother Black, you have them before you? I'm just going to...
Yes, I have them.
Repeat.
Persistent, sad, anxious, or empty mood. That is one. Loss of interest or pleasure.
Right.
Difficulty concentrating or making decisions. That's three. Poor appetite or over appetite. That is overeating or undereating. Recurrent thoughts of death or suicide.
All right.
Fatigue.
So put them on the screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brother Black.
Okay. So
I'm with you.
No, you're right there. They're on the screen now. Fatigue. Yes.
So if we look at these, Brother Berry, I wouldn't see that Jesus was suffering from any of these. He was just feeling sad, exceedingly sorrowful.
But I agree. One of the things that I'm happy that came out though is that because the spirit of prophecy does say that Jesus was depressed. One of the things I really wanted to take, because I wanted to also show a passage too, where a prophet was deeply depressed. And I wanted to that out to show the difference between the depression the depression that as spoken of here, from the depression where God's people is concerned. You see, because if we leave this platform and persons go into the spirit of prophecy and they see these things, they must be able to understand it as well.
Right.
Correct?
Brother Berry?
Because Ellen White used terms such as depression of spirit, depression of soul, depression of disease, mental depression. She used such as those.
Yeah, right? But as you say, Brother Berry, she said it was pressed down, and I agree with you.
But what we're speaking of is mental depression.
Yeah, you said that he was, didn't you say that, right? I didn't see that one because I use man character and personality. I didn't not say that to me, but your book that you use, it say that depression means he was pressed down, he was weighed down with the sins of the world. And I agree with you on that.
Yes, ma'am. But what I'm trying to say is that depression is different from the kind of depression that we see for God's people in the spirit of prophecy and also in the scriptures.
So your definition of depression is different from the other one, from the
two. So what I'm happy that came out is, I'm happy that it came out.
Yeah.
All of these things, because these are some of the things that I was looking at as well. But also there's a perspective that we really want to look at in terms of the plan of salvation, the condition we're in as it relates to depression itself and the way out of depression, which I'm sure you'll be getting to soon.
All right.
And
let us look at how Jesus.
Sister Angela, I am sorry, sister. Can I just interrupt you one? All right. If you look at depression of those who are in Christ and those who are in Christ, you will notice something. It always has a very spiritual connotation. Instead of if you look at depression that I taught you guys, you recognize that it is inward. But depression that they felt there, which would have been different from the clinical definition that I gave you guys, you would have recognized that this is they're always, the Christian always turn to God.
Yes,
that's right.
Understand? So the way how it is dealt with from a biblical perspective. The feelings, right, of what was going on, because the feeling comes, but how they dealt with it. Could we really say that that was depression?
Right.
Because depression, from what I have taught you, would not have been this kind of response. You understand? So
and
you
Dr.
need,
Lamley,
yeah.
Right.
Good night, everyone. I have to agree with you 100% because, yes.
Sorry, we have. I know you're very.
Hello?
Talk. Yes, I know persons were waiting. I know you're very anxious to talk. So we have three and respond probably to what something Dr. Lamley says. But I'm going to take the hands as they come, Brother Leighton, Alinthia, Sister Britton, and then you can speak thereafter, Sian. Right?
Yeah,
I take
all right, good.
Brother Leighton.
Okay. Based on the definition of depression that Doc taught us, would you agree then, in that purview, would you agree that depression is as a result of a violation of God's laws of health, or law, the ultimate, the law, the trust in divine power?
All right, that's a question out there. Is depression a violation? Well, clearly, yes.
A
question to that, Brother Berry. If we are saying that depression is a violation of God's law, you're saying that Jesus was depressed. How do you reconcile?
No, qualify that. Dr. Lamley spent some time qualifying that just a while ago.
Because I hear I have on the screen, was Jesus depressed? And I'm going to explain exactly what happened with Jesus. So the others can talk and then I'll come back.
Right, Sister Lamley dealt with that just a while ago. She the one thing that is one thing that is clear that she says, from a Christian perspective, it's from a spiritual standpoint, from a world perspective, you go into yourself, basically, if I could express it that way. It's more from a selfish perspective rather than from a spiritual perspective. So, and as I said, later down, I'm going to share with you a quote from Ellen White, and I want us to really look at it, because that kind of depression is not the kind of depression that we are speaking of here. It's a completely different thing, right? So I see the question that Leighton asked, yes, it is a violation. Sister Alinthia, Stephanie, Sian, and then I see Simone hand is up as well. Go ahead, Sister Grant.
Duke, we'll take them in that order and then allow Sister Chambers to do her thing, right?
Yes.
Those that are up now, and then turn over to Sister Chambers.
Go ahead, Alinthia.
Okay, good night, everybody. Happy Sabbath. Before Doc clarified, I just wanted to say that I totally agreed with Brother Chris and Narvia, because as I looked at Mark 14, verse 34, to me, that was saying that Jesus was depressed. It says, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch. It also says in verse 36 that even though Jesus said that he was sorrowful, he was depressed then, his eyes were also stayed on his Father. Because if you look at verse 36, it says, Abba Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. So that is saying to us that if we give our Father the control then over our emotion, then even if the feeling comes upon us, then we're able to control it and we're able to move forward, knowing that if we are focused on Christ, then we can overcome depression.
All right. Thank you so much for that contribution. Sister Britton?
Yes, I tend to be uncomfortable with the I know the trend that we look at depression. When we look at depression, we don't look at it as other illnesses. That is what I've noticed. It's as if we look at depression because it is probably something that is not physical, obviously, in some cases. We tend to look at it as if it is not an illness, just as how we would look at it's a different nature. All illnesses have different nature. As we look at high blood pressure or diabetes, I feel more comfortable when we look at it as an illness, because that is what I've been learning, that disease never comes without a cause. So I would feel, I like when it is looked at as how we look at other diseases. So I say we'd have to look at it to see what is the breach and what is the cause, because how will we cure it? Because when we start going into whether a person is a Christian or not a Christian, although that is a topic, or look at somebody's level of Christianity based on how they might feel or react to a certain situation that they may experience, I think we're beginning to get very subjective, and even to the point that we might become judgmental to be able to qualify a person's level of Christianity, so to speak.
All right, well, one of the things that we really wanted to help persons to understand, when you look at the spirit of prophecy, it does speak to different persons having depression. One, as I said earlier, we want to ensure that we put it out there. There is clinical depression, which clearly is a disease. But there are temporary states of mind that is referred to as depression as well in the spirit of prophecy. One of which Sister Chambers made mention of, and other persons have, when Jesus was said in the spirit of prophecy that he was depressed. But it's not a clinical state of depression. Now, what Doc had put on the table, and based on what was the slide before this one stated, is stating clinical depression. Now, should Christians be clinically depressed? That's the question. Should we be clinically depressed? I'm using the term clinically depressed because I want to separate it from everything else, right? So that is really what we want to address. Yes, Jan.
Yes, good night again, everyone.
Good night.
All right, so what I was thinking about was the fact that mental states can affect us physically. Different state of mind can have a physical impact on our bodies. And our physical state can also affect our minds, right? But in the end, everyone will be exposed to these variables, right? We'll be exposed to certain thoughts and we'll be exposed to certain physiological conditions as well. But the key is that irrespective of the external conditions, our emotional or mental conditions, we will not allow those variables to affect our relationship with God. Because ultimately, it is when we become separated from God that we sin. Christ himself was exposed to a myriad of emotional states within which we are not even able to comprehend. However, he did not allow those different states of mind and temptation to separate him from his Father. And I think that is when it becomes, quote unquote, clinical. When it has become clinical, it will always be as a result of that separation. And that is just my position. So if we think as Christians we will not be exposed to these variables, we need to think again, because I also believe that from the scripture and spirit of prophecy, that it is also a part of the refinement process. We will be subject to these things, but will we allow that to separate us from God? And that is where what defines our character and our relationship with God ultimately.
Thank you, Sian. Simone?
Good night, everyone. Happy Sabbath. I have to concur with Sister Gritton and Sion. They have said some very important things. I have experienced in my profession so many Christians who have mild depression, and then I don't think it's a reflection of their state of Christianity. It's more a reflection of the fact they have broken many of the laws of health. They're operating for weeks or months on 5 hours of sleep a night. They don't get any sunlight. They don't drink enough water. They get no exercise. With the breaking of the laws of health comes disease. Depression is a disease. It's not
right.
these people's relationship with Christ have not changed. They are still having a good relationship with Christ. It's just that they have broken the laws of health and have caused disease on their bodies. So they get these states of mind, which I don't think they ever go into the severe depressions, but they do go into mild depression. They don't ever reach a state where they have to be on medication or anything like that. But they do go into mild depression. They do have fluctuations in their minds and their thoughts and some things that happen to them that you can see some signs of depression, maybe two or three of those characteristics that we just listed a while ago are being manifested in them. And as Christians, we must be careful not to think that, oh, if I'm experiencing thoughts of death and experiencing these things, I'm no longer a Christian. Something is wrong with my Christianity. Something is wrong with the way you're observing the laws of health, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My time now, Brother Barry?
Yeah. Yes.
I must say that my two sisters and my brother right before me, they have made it so easy for me. Thank you. You are saying exactly what I am saying. Let us continue. We're looking at Jesus now. He was sorrowful. And how did he deal with it when he was sorrowful? He told his friends and sought help. Remember, he asked them to come with him in Matthew 26, verse 38. He asked them to come with him. He said, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry here, ye here, and watch with me. So he seek help. So that is how we should deal with it. He prayed. He went to his father and he prayed. He said, if it be possible, let this cup pass. But he trusted God still and said, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. And then he fixed his eyes on the future. No, he said that looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So this is how Jesus dealt when he was very sorrowful and sad in the Garden of Eden. And that is how we are to deal with when things come upon us and we feel sad and we feel as if we can't manage. These are the steps that we should take to help us to really deal with our period of sadness. Can I go on any other comments?
Yes, just to note, and in terms of when you look at this, Jesus did not violate any laws of health.
Right. No. So right.
Violate any laws of health. Because and if it is that we're looking at, which we are not, we're looking at clinical depression. If we're looking at depression from a broad perspective and we conclude that depression is sin, what would we conclude for Christ? So clearly, we have to stick to the definition, the clinical definition of depression. Any violation of any law is sin. Any violation of the health laws is sin. The moral laws is sin. Any violation whatsoever. Is that persons are violating any of the laws and they become depressed is as a result of their sin. Right? So working with the clinical definition to clear part up because
so you are saying now that Jesus was not clinically depressed.
No, he wasn't.
Right. He was, so I call it sorrowful because that's what the Bible says. So that my soul is exceedingly sorrowful. And sometimes we get exceedingly sorrowful because of situation also. But we have to know how to deal with it as Christians. Two more hands are raised, Brother Berry. We can
all right,
take
so you're the Sister Mitchell and Sister Henry in that order. Sister Mitchell? Probably she's experiencing some trouble with her internet. So in the meantime,
hello.
Sister
Good
Mitchell.
night.
Yes, go ahead.
Good night.
Good night, Sister Mitchell.
Hello?
Yes, you hearing
Are you
us?
hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you. We're hearing you, sis.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, we're hearing you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Earphone just giving me some time. I want depression. Be mood this. Yes.
You're breaking up, my
being
sister.
mood this as a Christian. Question that pop up in my mind is what kind of mood are we in?
What kind of mood should we be in as Christians?
What kind of mood would we be in as a Christian?
Okay. What kind of mood should we be in as a Christian? Have I repeated your question?
Right. That would lead to that would lead to depression. And remember, and also the thought that depression brings, suicide, and this perspective.
She's having
Or a
some
mood.
technical challenges.
Yes, you're breaking up, sis.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I think we get the gist that she's talking about.
Yeah.
What mood the Christian should, so we can address that as we go along.
Yes, I have it in my thing to talk about the mood.
Right. So in the interest of time, we will take that into consideration, Sister Doreen. So we have Sister Henry and Brother Black, and then the wind up for Sister Chambers.
Yes, I'm going to wind up.
Yeah.
I'm having internet issues too. Are you hearing me clearly? If not, I'll just stand down.
Yes, we're hearing you clearly.
You're hearing me clearly. All right. It's just back to what Brother Duke was stressing about sticking to depression being clinical in its definition, because if we were looking at it, the spirit of prophecy in A Call to Stand Apart does speak of
Repeat that, sis. Sister Henry? All right, we'll take Brother Black in the meantime.
All right. I'm gonna cut mine in two questions, but I'll just take one. I'll just ask a question instead. In 1 Kings 19 and verse 4, where Elijah was a prophet who went and slew so many, or did God's work then, if you want to put it that way then. Slew the prophet, the Baal prophets. Immediately after, he had to be running for his life, running from a woman who threatened him. What do you think went wrong there?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, he lost sight of God, the God who has been taking care of him all along.
But just to add to what Brother Black says, because he asked God to take his life as well.
Right.
We want to, if you look at the clinical depression and the things that were said about clinical depression and this situation, how would you describe it? I see Leighton's hand is up and Sister Gritton's hand is up. Let me take those two on the subject. And then we're going to allow Sister Chambers to complete her presentation.
Yes, to wrap up. I'm going to wrap up now.
Points very short, please, so that we can get in and as much as possible.
Yes, go ahead, Leighton.
Yeah, he violated the law. One of the law fell. I guess at that point, he wasn't trusting in divine.
Right, trust in God. Right. I agree.
Sister Gritton?
Yes, not only that too, sometimes as Spirit of Prophecy said, as Sister White said in Prophets and King, is that sometimes when we have a mountaintop experience, as all of us sometimes have, and then we think that everything is going to go the way we want, and it does not, then we tend to have that valley experience. And that is what happened to Elijah and other prophets too.
That is so true, because Ellen White does speak about the excitement, having too much excitement, that it will lead to depression, and also some things such as coffee and tea, what it does to you, and then it leads to depression. So that is really true. Sister Chambers?
Yes, I'm just going to wrap up now. No, it is treatable, as my sister said earlier. It is a disease, and it is treatable. But for us as Christians, as was said earlier also, that if we obey the laws of health, Elijah really did not trust God at that point. If we do our exercise, we get our adequate rest, we eat right, we get our sunshine, which is very, very important in treating depression, then we can overcome depression. If we once it's not clinical, if it's clinical depression, we might have to seek medical help. You might have to get counseling, or sometimes the doctor even put you on medication. But once as a child of God, as a Christian child of God, if you find yourself going off, you can realize what laws of health you are breaking. If you are not resting right, if you are not exercising, if you're not eating right, and if you are locked up in your house and in an AC car every day and not getting any sunshine, you know that, well, this is what I'm doing. That is why I'm feeling this way. And so I need to start doing what I need to do. There are herbs also like lavender, oil, chamomile, ginseng, and the cruciferous vegetables. I can hardly call this name. Like the cabbage and the kale and those spinach and all that. Those can help you in your diet with depression. And finally, yeah, I said counseling. Some persons will definitely need counseling. And finally, we need to cast all our cares upon the Lord. We need to trust God. He said that trust in the Lord with all your heart and lead not to your own understanding. Always acknowledge him and he will direct your path. These are some texts that I have here. Romans 8:38 says, all things work together for good to them that love God. So as Dr. Lamley said, and I agree with her, whatever happens to you, don't say that you have bad luck or this is so bad. You need to know that I'm a child of God and God is leading my life, and so he has ordained and so he's going to see me through. Another thing is that as Christians, we need to have a cheerful spirit, as the sister asked earlier. We can't be gloomy and depressed every day. The life is so hard and something wrong with me. As Christians, we have to be cheerful. Sister White said that we are not to talk of the gloominess of life. We are to talk of the cheerful things. So these are some texts you can look at in Matthew. Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, say that, why are you fretting over tomorrow? Why are you worrying what you're going to eat and what you're going to drink? The birds are flying outside quite happily, and I'm taking care of them. The flowers are blooming beautifully, and I'm taking care of them, and you are worth more than them. So I will take care of you. Don't worry. Some of us worry too much, and that is sin. Because they say that worry is blind and cannot see. If you worry, you don't trust. And if you trust God, you won't worry. So if we need to put our full trust in God to know that whatever, if we are his child, because most of us are parents, we will not want anything bad to happen to our child. We sometimes will even give our life for our child. Jesus has given his life for us. So he's not going to let us suffer. He said that David said, I was young and now I'm old. I've never seen the righteous forsake nor see the begging bread. And in these times that we're coming on, no, we have to really exercise our faith in God and believe in him that he will take us through anything and keep our minds steadfast on him so that we can be healthy and happy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Chambers, for that engaging presentation. I see Stephanie's hand is up. Sister Gritton, a quick comment, and then
yes. I just want to quote a thought that Sister White shared. It is while it is very good to be to say that person should be positive and all of that. Depression is such a sickness that when you have it, you need someone to do that for you, because it's very hard to do it for yourself. And she said, and she was commenting on Job 6 verse 14, kind words, looks of sympathy, expressions of appreciation would be to many a struggling one as a cup of cold water to a thirsty soul. A word of sympathy, an act of kindness would lift burdens that rest heavily upon weary shoulders. Oh, yeah. And this is taken from Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings.
Amen, my sister, I agree.
Thank you so much. I must tell you though, even though we haven't looked at depression in this light, we haven't even started to scratch the surface just yet. There are number of health factors too that is spoken of, especially in mind, character, and personality. Ellen White points to that can lead to depression. There are a number of other things too, and we need to also be equipped as to how we can help those. And I like what Stephanie said and that she shared from Ellen White, how we can really help other persons through depression. One of the things from a broad perspective as it relates to our salvation, sin brings us into darkness. It brings us into a state of depression from a spiritual perspective. But God gives us light, and if you notice, sunlight is very critical, fresh air. All the laws of health are very critical to take us out of that state of depression. God has given us Jesus Christ himself, who provides us with everything, right? He's the son of righteousness, and you can name it, right? The bread from heaven for nutrition, and a number of other things. He is able to take us from this depressed state of sin. Depression is just a reflection of what is really happening. It is a reflection of what is happening in our environment. We have, as Christians, we have a way out through Jesus Christ. Will the fact that we are Christians say that we will not be affected, we will not be infected by depression? No. It only says that if we are infected, we will not be affected by depression because we have who to go to and we have where we can get help. And persons may not find that help as soon as others, and we too will have to be sensitive towards other persons who are depressed and be caring towards them. But as Christians, we have a way out, and if we stick close to the Lord, in many instances, sometimes the things that are happening around us spiritually and what is happening, especially in the church, can cause us a level of spiritual depression, but it's not clinical depression, right? So as we move forward, let us really look out for the signs of depression and also seek to help those who are going through that period of time, because trust me, it is a very tough period of time and no single person can really pull themselves out if they really get deep into that state. So I want to thank you all for sharing this evening. I just want to turn over to Dr. Lamley for the wrap up.
Thank you so much. It really it has been, and I really appreciate each person's participation. There are some Brother Black, you wanted to say something some time ago. You had gotten your